In business, I really have a choice. Am I a defensive company or am I an offensive company? And I think we are a defensive company. Today, we are going to talk about playing defense versus offense in a SaaS software company. Now, I'm going to go through a formula which I borrowed from Jason Cohen, the founder of WP Engine. So I want to use that example to segue into the talk about playing defense versus offense. And my conclusion, which one is more important? First, let's spend some time talking about the formula. The question you often ask yourself is, at what point in a software company does the ARR going to stall, meaning that it wouldn't grow if you know your churn? Now, if you know the formula, you can skip to the middle of this video to talk about my learnings as a corollary of this formula. If you don't know the formula, listen up. Now, in that world, if we define gross new ARR, meaning the new ARR that you're going to get without accounting for churn just yet. So your ARR will stop growing if the gross new ARR is equal to the churn for the month, meaning the money you come in is equal to the money that is going out due to churn. So in that world, how can we express this? The churn rate is equal to churn of that month divided by the ARR at the time. It's not the number of customers, it's the dollar amount of absolute churn for that month divided by the ARR at that month. And then if you rearrange that equation, churn that month is equal to the churn rate multiplied by ARR at the time. So if you use these variables, if N is equal to gross new product, if C is equal to the churn rate, and A is equal to the existing ARR, if we define this terminology, then we can plug in some numbers. The ARR will stall if the gross new ARR is equal to churn that month. Let's express churn that month as a function of churn rate. If you plug in this equation into here, then churn that month is equal to churn rate multiplied by ARR. So if this is the canonical formula, gross new ARR is equal to churn rate multiplied by existing ARR. So if the gross new ARR is greater than the churn, then the company is growing. At least you grow something. If N is equal to CA, then the ARR stalls. And if the N is less than CA, then you're losing ARR. The point is that C is really important. Let's focus on the equilibrium case, which is N is equal to CA. Then the question is, by looking at today's churn rate, you can actually determine at what point is the equilibrium ARR. So the equilibrium ARR, it just happens to be A asteroid is equal to N divided by C. So you can almost project the ARR in which your company is going to come to a halt, meaning that it wouldn't grow anymore, which is a really sad thing to see. To give an example, let's suppose that your new ARR is $100,000 a month. Like, congratulations, you're generating $100,000 of new ARR. This is gross new ARR. You have few cases. If you are churning about 0.5% of your current ARR, if that's your churn rate, then your ARR will start at $20 million. Maybe a median case, if you are churning about 1% of your total revenue per month at $100,000 of ARR, you're going to start out at $10 million ARR. And the bad case is if you are churning at 1.5% ARR of churn rate, then you're going to start out around $6.7 million of ARR. And then the worst case is if you say churning, say 2% of your ARR, then you're going to start out at 5% ARR. Now, churn rate is different for all kinds of markets. Maybe the enterprise software have a much lower churn rate. Consumer products could be as high as 5 to 7%, which you will see in an example that's not a good business unless you keep the demand coming in. Let's flip the script. So this is given the churn rate, you can know at what ARR will it stall out. So let's give some examples of the other way, which suppose you are at $10 million ARR. You made it. You got to the $10 million of ARR. If your churn rate is 1%, that means 100K is going out of the door every month due to churn. So if your new revenue is only 100,000, then you literally broke even for that month. 10 million stays at 10 million. That means in order to grow at any meaningful rate, your new ARR has to be above 100,000, which may not be that easy. As you can see, if your churn rate is called at 5%, then you need to generate $500,000 of new ARR in order to not have the ARR drop. That's how crazy it is. If it's a leaky bucket, such as consumer apps, the demand has to be so much greater in order for your ARR not to drop. If you like this kind of video, please subscribe. And by the way, one of my goals for 2026 is to get to 100 subscribers. We are at 88 right now, and so just 12 more. So if you like this kind of video, please do me a favor and subscribe. That will help me or motivate me to continue to make these videos, which is telling about the startup world through examples. Now, the reason I'm saying all of this is churn is the invisible cancer that kills all startups. A lot of times I read these reports of like, we got to $10 million ARR really fast. Okay, think about it. If their churn is 10% a month, that is $1 million going out of the door. So unless they can keep up the demand, their ARR is going to drop. So ARR doesn't tell me whether your company is doing well. Churn tells me whether your company is doing well. If I have any number for a good SaaS company to pay attention to, is churn is probably more important than your gross new ARR. Unless you can reduce churn, your company will stall out at some point. And it is the thing that most people don't care until it's too late to care. Churn is also a very good function where it forces you to focus on the substance of the startup as opposed to how can I get more sales and customers. And it's important. So let's talk about the second segment of this talk. I divide the startup into different functions and they can go into each camps. On one camp is the offense camp. On the other camp is the defense camp. So let's go through some of the functions. Engineering, that's a defense camp primarily because their job is to reduce churn, increase stickiness by building more products, by locking the customers so that they can find value. Customers don't keep using a subscription software unless they constantly get value out of it year over year. They will churn if they are not getting value. The only way for them to not churn is that they have to keep getting value. That can be broken down into a few parts too. Some customers were just not even a good fit for your company. And if you try to squeeze them or if you try to get them when they were not ready or they were never the right type to start with, you're gonna see that churn later on, a few years down the road. Furthermore, they might come to you because you have low pricing. Those customers are more incompetent than the qualified customers. They will churn, not because they don't like you, but because they couldn't really pay. For example, if your customer needs a minimum amount of equity to use a cap table management software and they couldn't raise that much money, they are not really your customers to begin with. Account management or customer success is also playing defense. Defense means their job is to make the customers happy, to reduce churn, or to increase retention. Sales is playing offense. They are the field that keeps getting new customers. Sales is driving up the new ARR. With really, really good sales, you can make up for the churn. What I'm just arguing is a significant amount of ARR, you're gonna find no amount of sales can really compensate for your churn. And churn depends on engineering and customer success. Next one, product. Product is on the defense camp. You can say product is also going to help with sales. Yes, engineering technically also helps with sales. But the most obvious way the product shows up is that it makes the product sticky. Customers love it. They keep using your product. Product is on the camp of defense. Let's keep going. SDRs, sales development representatives, they are on the offense camp. They are the ones that increase the sales pipeline so that AEs, account executives, can keep selling. And finally, there is the marketing. Marketing is on the offense camp. So on the offense camp, you have sales, SDRs, and marketing. On the defense camp, you have customer success, engineering, and product. Pretty even. And the entire company can be broken down into offense camp or defense camp, sales, marketing, or customer outreach, or product engineering and customer support. Which one do you think is more important? This is literally at this point, it's a philosophy thing. It's no longer about which one is more important. Some companies actually don't focus that much on churn. Some companies focus a lot on churn. Some companies focus a lot on sales and outreach. It's a sales-led company. It's a marketing-led company. They just keep innovating and they just keep changing themselves so that they attract more and more customers. In my opinion, I chose the route of making our company a defensive company. That's because when you are so good, when you have so much substance, and focus on the defense is the best way to force yourself to have substance. To force yourself of, I'm intellectually honest, I really don't need this customer. They're not the right customer. If we get them, we're going to churn them. It's having the intellectual honesty of saying, we're going to build the best product for our existing customers and we're going to keep them almost forever because they're so happy with us. That's the camp I fall into. But people with that camp tend to be very product-minded, very engineering-minded, and they almost disdain the marketing and the sales and getting more funnel. The best companies have both. I will say I'm someone who started with like 80% on the defense camp. And now I'm like moving to 70% defense camp. But if you were to really ask me to choose one, I still play the defense camp. If I can build our company at $10 million ARR and only have less than 0.5% churn. 0.5% churn means $10 million is like $50,000 leaving the door every month. Then I can generate, call it $500,000 of new ARR, and then $50,000 of that is going out due to churn. That is a much more successful company, in my opinion, than having $150,000 of churn and generating $500,000 of a new ARR. It's just, for mental model wise, that's the thing I care more about. And by the way, losing doesn't mean like you just lose the ARR. You lose the customer, you lose the upsell of that customer, you lose the trust of that customer, you lose almost all the references that this customer likes you. On the other hand, if you don't lose these customers, which takes hard work to make the product work for them, then they will refer more people. They know exactly what you stand for. They understand your quality and they will keep referring. So even that defense will become a self-generating engine. One of my friends is a tennis player and he had this approach of like, I just win by attrition. I just keep hitting it back. And at some point, the offensive player just feel like I cannot win a point or a point is really hard to win. And they tend to make mistakes because of it and so on. And that's how he wins his tennis games. That being said, a lot of times in tennis, you could focus on the offense, which is like 1 or 2 strikes, but those tend to be riskier. Those tend to be more volatile and so on. In business, I really have a choice with a limited amount of resources. Am I a defensive company or am I an offensive company? And I think we are a defensive company. If I have every incremental dollar, I will spend it mostly towards defense. I will put it mostly on defense budget. But if I have excess money, I will spend some in offense. So the best companies are the best in both. But I like to think that you have to have an internal ranking of what you stand for. And for me, I stand for the defense side. How about you? What do you want? What do you think your company will eventually become? Are you a more offensive company or are you a more defensive company? In my opinion, the offensive company is just, they look good from the beginning. They look good at the early stages. And then they scratch their head of like, why is my ARR not growing that fast? It's because they probably over-index on the selling and kind of getting the not so qualified customers to begin with. The companies that grow like this, usually they go like this. Usually, or at least they don't stay for as long. Defense company wins the race. Tortoise wins the race against the rabbit. And tortoise is that defensive company. Stay at the top, steady, slowly compounding. Rabbit, offense, but they also crash pretty quickly. The best scenario is you do both, but if you have a choice, I will highly encourage the audience to think, how can you build your startup to be more like a tortoise than a rabbit? Thank you so much for watching. Have a great day.